Okay. Hi, everyone. Hopefully you can hear me. If you can hear me, obviously feel free to react. Give me a thumbs up. I think during this webinar, excellent. Thanks, Casper. Obviously, I want to make this webinar fairly interactive. If people make good points, feel free to react to them. I guess I don't want it to be a webinar where you have it on in the background while you're simultaneously doing your emails, for example, like I used to do back in the day. But I think we're probably waiting for maybe some other people, but this is a recorded session. So whether people come now or whether they aren't able to come at all, they're still able to see the recording of it. Just as an intro, so this is the first part of the legal ops careering ahead webinar series. It's the first of 12 different webinars that I'll be organizing during the year. I don't think I'll moderate every single one, but I will definitely be part of the organization of them. And they all have a different kind of facet of the legal ops career. So with this one, this is when is the right time to become a legal ops consultant? And I suppose there's more of a heavy emphasis on consultancy, and when is the good time to take that bold move and become a consultant. I'm pleased to have Lucy, Tom, and Rob with me today. I won't introduce them more than that for now, because in a minute they will tell their own stories in their own words. But obviously, like I say, feel free to react to the points that they make. And I suppose without further ado, thanks panel for joining me. I hope this will be a good discussion for the people that are watching. Hopefully it'll be an inspiration for some, and maybe for some others it will be a good grounding or a good understanding of what it actually takes to become a consultant, but yourself, right? So if I jump straight in, I will start us off with perhaps an easy question, which is, what is consultancy? What do you guys see as what do you feel consultancy actually is? And I'll start with Lucy with that one.
Great, thanks, Mark. Hi, everyone. It's great to be here. I think consulting for me is that sort of independent support to a business. I was an in-house lawyer for many years and private practice before that. And when I moved into consulting, I thought, well, it's just having conversations, but actually there is a bit of an art to it, I think, in terms of being a specialist and being independent as well. So providing that sort of objective perspective to businesses, whether that's law firms or in-house legal teams. I work with in-house legal teams. But for me, consulting is helping businesses sort of identify their challenges and working through how to impact and make a difference, whether it's technology implementation, or if it's specific support, or if it's just sort of generally being there as a third party advisor who's perhaps one step removed from the business.
And Tom, your thoughts?
Well, I think Lucy's summarised that pretty well, actually. I suppose the only build I can think of there is in terms of why people might want to get a consultant in. I think that there's two sort of big aspects that stand out for me, maybe three aspects. One is you don't have the capacity yourself. The other one is you might not have the expertise yourself, and you want people that get a little bit more of a vision outside of your individual company. And also the third reason is sometimes you just need another voice. And even though you might be confident on the answer, actually having somebody else say something that's a little bit less of a tired voice, in the same way that sometimes kids listen to their uncles and aunts more than they listen to their parents, that kind of thing. I think that can be an impact. There is actually, it occurs to me, a fourth reason, which is sometimes people just want consultants so they can hide behind a big name, but I wouldn't promote that as a good reason to get a consultant in, but that can also be a motivation. But in terms of the general description, really, I'm just talking. Lucy, I think, nailed it.
Okay, great. And Rob?
Yeah, essentially those guys have got it right. I mean, obviously, for me, it's a mixture of two things really: either implementation work or strategy consulting. Those are the kind of two main pillars of the work that I do. The majority would probably be on the implementation side. But someone external, as you said, to give a different perspective. Sometimes it's also about adding a degree of external validation and credibility to a project, similar to what Tom was saying, really, in terms of, well, I can give examples. I can say, well, I did this successfully at another firm, and this worked well, and this didn't work quite so well. That can be useful for internal people that are trying to push a project forwards.
That makes sense. And I guess jumping into the kind of personal insight, maybe we'll start off with Rob for your journey into consultancy.
Sure. Yeah, I'll give a quick overview of my background. Not too long. I'll try and keep it brief, but it will be coming up to 17 years in February that I've been in legal tech or legal ops. Originally started out as a business analyst. That was actually my first job out of uni at an international law firm, Owen Mitchell. I went on to lead a knowledge management initiative, and document automation was a part of that project, really. So I was doing all the business case and requirements gathering and everything to get that project in. And then once I'd implemented the project, that was really day one. And I started working. We brought in a consultant in Catherine Bamford that I'm sure many of you are familiar with, and she sat with me 2 days a week for 6 months, training me on how to do the document automation coding and helping with the projects, that sort of thing. And I guess that's probably where the seed was sown for me in terms of looking at consultancy as an option and seeing what she was doing. That was an inspiration for me, and also that for me was a breakthrough project as well that led to opportunity, right? I mean, led to opportunities to speak customer success conferences and things like that. So I was in that role as the document automation manager, or moved into that role for 2 years, and that then led to leading a global implementation again of Doc Auto at BLP, now BCLP. Where I did again another role I held for 2 years, and I had a taste of client consulting there, where we were offering consulting. I was consulting with one of the potential clients. We actually helped us to win a huge banking client, and it was just fascinating, kind of being in the room and advising them on what to do on the sort of technology selection process, and working on it. I just loved that work. So that again was another inspiration. So after 2 years at BLP, I felt it was the right time to take the leap of faith on my own and go out independent. So I became an independent consultant roughly 6 years ago now, specializing in document automation. And I also, during that period, got involved in an AI startup called Contract Genetica, which is a word add-in for drafting and reviewing documents using AI, and that's been really interesting opportunity that I've had, and we were lucky to be acquired end of last year by Katana and Brochet. So that's been another interesting project as well. So I've been working on that, document automation consultancy, and some chatbot work and a few other bits and bobs as well.
Okay, thank you. And I guess the thing that I want to see, I suppose, with this particular webinar and others as well, is that it kind of helps people see what the possibilities are, I suppose. And that's in the same sort of way that when you were working where you were, I guess you saw other consultants doing what they were doing, and you kind of saw it as a possibility. And I think that's just kind of what I see with this webinar and the rest of the series is kind of about helping people. But maybe if I then move to Lucy and your journey.
Yeah, of course. So mine a bit different to Robert. I was a lawyer for many years. I was in private practice for 8 years, and then moved in-house in the oil and gas industry. and was having children around that time. So that supposed work-life balance of moving in-house. But I just loved being in-house compared to the private practice. I loved working with engineers, with everyone, different within that business. I left there and was then head of legal at Pizza Hut Europe. So I moved from like billion-dollar contracts to sort of 599 terms conditions. They're slightly different, but similar. Well, I was a head of legal role, so it was a more senior role, but again, quite a small team, similar to what I'd had in the oil and gas business. And totally different business, but fundamentally still lawyering, providing corporate support, things like that. And then my last legal role was as general counsel for a recruitment business, taking them through the joys of GDPR, which they very kindly nicknamed Lucy's Law, which I thought was very great, but I had to pronounce them actually. This is a rather larger piece of legislation than just that. But it was during that really that I began to really see the value of operationalizing things. It was very process focused, and I was a sole counsel at the time, so I had to do a lot of the work myself. We didn't have budget to bring in consultants and things. And, I realised after 20 years as a lawyer, actually the operations and more strategic side of things was where I wanted to go. I thought about doing it on my own, but wasn't quite brave enough. So I went to KPMG 4 years to learn, I suppose, the fine art of consulting. Big Four, sort of standard methodology, fantastic place to learn, and have lots of opportunity as well. But, that's one of the great things about the Big Four. So I did client-facing work there in the legal operations consulting team, and also worked internally as change lead on the moving SAP to S/4HANA. It's a huge technology implementation project. But my heart was still small teams, being more independent, more agile and flexible. So last year I left KPMG and joined Melius, which is a boutique legal operations consultancy set up by John Bennett, who was formerly various roles in bank, but was legal coup at Santander. So the two of us provide very much sort of strategic operating model type reviews to in-house legal teams, working with a mix of teams and industries. And I say to people, KPMG was fantastic, but I feel a little bit like I've come back out into the light. I sort of feel able to build networks and do events like this, whereas at KPMG, they're just always a little bit more risk averse for where I wanted to be. So that's me.
Excellent. Thanks, Lucy. And Tom?
Yeah, so I sort of a little bit of a hybrid of the two, really, in that my professional career only really started when I was about 25. I was mostly washing dishes and working in bars up until then. And then I went and worked for an engineering company in their commercial function. And this was a sort of big defense engineering. We touched oil and gas a little bit, but I was working on contract negotiation, compliance regimes, and a lot of tendering and bid writing. So I was writing up engineering models and running project cost models, but looking from that engineering lens. And to the extent I interacted with legal, as in with actual lawyers, I'd be the guy going to the lawyer and finding that sort of condescending, supercilious knockdown of everything I did. I'm not saying every lawyer does it, and I'm sure Lucy doesn't, but that's what I experienced. And then in my early 30s, cut a long story short, I qualified as a lawyer, and I moved from defense engineering into FMCG. And I spent 9 years in FMCG working through the layers in the legal function there. Sort of did procurement support, e-commerce support, supported our R&D function, our global brands function, that kind of thing, and running teams of various sizes, including setting up some outsourcing. Like we had a couple of innovative outsourcing models we set up and the like. And what I found really interesting is even though FMCG and defense are very, very far apart in terms of many types of mentality, in terms of risk appetite, how they do things. In some ways, FMCG is so much more agile and faster. In other ways, its quality procedures was stuff the engineering company had stopped doing 20 years earlier in terms of sort of robustness and avoiding clunkiness and things like that. And I found that applying what I'd learned both pre-law and in law to legal support was having incredible results in terms of how we were impacting the business, and some things I was very proud of, and I did well out of it and got promotions and the like. But I started reaching a point where I was frustrated is too strong a word, but I was increasingly feeling that I wanted to get the ideas out more. And I think something that Lucy said in terms of that freedom to talk Certainly, when you're a global legal director of a FTSE listed company, you feel like there's only so much you can throw a few punchy hand grenades out into the public domain. Because if you just get that, text is so nuanced, and if you get that balance wrong, that could be terrible for both your employer and for you. But also, I wanted to spread it more and learn more from how other people experience it. So about a year and a bit ago, I took 9 months out to interact with my kids and generally not do a huge amount, watch the European Championships, that kind of thing. And then at the end of that, I launched my consultancy Flocsam, and I've decided to really focus in less on the stuff that Robert and Lucy are doing, but more on the what I consider to be the key sort of, I don't know whether to call them strategic or tactical, but the key implementation points in in-house legal support. And that's where I focus. So it's effectively, do you know the outcomes, the true outcome you're aiming for? Do you know the best solution considering full life cycle cost? And do you know how you're going to execute that solution? And so I deliver workshops that hit those 3 points, depending on where you are in your own evolutionary life cycle now.
Thanks, Tom. I think it's fair to say that you all have your different journeys and different routes into legal ops consultancy. I think you would have made a decision at some point on that journey, early in the journey, I'm sure, to determine whether consultancy is right for you. And it'd probably be helpful to maybe go into a bit more detail about, I suppose, when it's right for somebody and when I suppose it isn't so right for somebody. And maybe I'll start with Lucy this time.
It's really difficult at the right time. For me, there's a bit of a gut feel about it. I think there's a little bit of sort of the stars aligning, and I certainly talking with Tom and Rob before this when we were having our conversations. I think it's something that we've all been mulling over a little bit, and then comes the point where you kind of just have to go for it. So at what point have you got the right skills, the expertise, the network? All of those things begin to come together, and I think there's just a time when you just have to go for it. It's not easy. I mean, we'll get into more of the discussion, I think, around some of the specific, what's great and perhaps what's a bit of a challenging. But one thing that I love, and as a lawyer, as I say, you're always learning on the job. Never stand still. I think it's that opportunity. It keeps things interesting. So maybe if you're feeling a little bit stagnant in your current role. But yeah, the stars have to align, I think, to some extent, to take the leap.
I think thanks, Lucy. I think I will rephrase the question a little bit. I suppose what we're talking about within this webinar, I suppose, is kind of how you've all kind of basically started your own business yourselves as consultants. But I suppose there's a interim measure, which is to be a contractor, I suppose, which I suppose is a certain safer option, I suppose, rather than the actual kind of growth of a business itself and its branding and its business development and kind of everything that goes around a kind of startup consultancy. I guess there will be people within this webinar probably and people that see this later that are maybe considering moving from what they're doing now to their own consultancy. But I suppose in a way that my question is, I suppose, what options do people have? When is, I suppose, your consultancy the right option, I suppose? So maybe I pass that on maybe to Tom.
Yeah, I mean, I wish I was. I'm fairly fresh in this. Like, I launched at the end of October, so I still don't know whether I've picked the right moment to go into consultancy or whether, and I'm still very much in that phase of whether it's whether my offering is the right product market fit and is the right sort of, like the whole ikigai concept. I'm comfortable that what I've got is something that will bring benefit. I'm not sure it's something that other people want and will purchase. So I'm still kind of like in that phase of sort of seeing if there's enough volume that I can get out of that. I think in terms of your specific question, there's like, sort of what are the options available? This is something that part of the reason I took sort of 9-10 months thinking about what I wanted to do is because I was trying to work out how to fit that in. So in my instance, I've gone with quite a heavily branded concept, and at times it feels slightly pretentious because I'm referring to a company name and it is just little old me sitting under the lid. But the reason I want to do that is because I want to try to present it as a set of ideas, and I don't want it to be bound up in me. I want to try to promote a message that anyone can do it. I think that when you are first starting out, I do think that personal branding is very important and very valuable. And either having that, Lucy alluded to network earlier, I think a little bit of that network and that credibility, I think, is very helpful, or the ability to create that credibility fairly quickly. So I say I did nothing before 25. One thing I did do is I spent a year as a street fundraiser learning how to stop people on the street, gain trust quickly, and encourage them to give money to excellent causes, which was fantastic value for money for the charities that did it. And I'm very proud of what I did. And I still have a little bit of that kind of ability sort of residual within myself. And I think that also sort of helps it. Have I answered your question? I'm not entirely sure how, but I do sort of, in terms of that consultancy element, one thing I'm finding very interesting is that kind of work in terms of like, do you want to do a couple of days a week? Do you want to pick up small jobs? I think that balance of, do you grab anything and everything in the early days, and do you sort of stay focused on a thing? I think, again, that's one of the sort of interesting dilemmas here. But it feels to me that the sensible thing is you take what you can initially, and then you build up your momentum and your head of steam. Feels to me to be the right way to go about it. But that's as much based on advice I've received as on me saying I've got any answers.
Thanks, Tom. And Rob, do you want to have you got anything to add before we jump into kind of when is the right time, I guess?
Sure. I was about to start answering the when. But yeah, I think there's certainly options for how you do it, and whether you're just going out on your own, like I did, whether you're going to partner with others or join another consulting business, or some sort of combination of those things. And a point which I think we'll come on to a bit more is later, maybe, is whether you're working on or in the business, and what you're looking for in terms of flexibility. Are you looking for a job, different work, and to work with different clients, and to continue sort of doing the work in a kind of it's you and you're doing the work capacity, or are you looking to partner with someone and build a business and grow a larger business, whether that's a consultancy or on the tech side? That's certainly one of the considerations to it. I was about to answer about the timing piece, but shall I pause there, Mark?
No. Okay. It's I guess a good segue into that. So I guess the first point that I wanted to ask about was about skills. I suppose, when do you feel that you've learnt enough to have the kind of solid foundation in which to, I suppose, consult others, I suppose. So maybe start with that one.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I was very much in the camp of get a number of years of solid experience doing it with a specific skill that hopefully the market wants. As Tom said, you test that out. See if you could. I mean, for me as well, it was about lining up a potential contract. Before I didn't just jump out into nothing. I had a contract lined up, and I was open about that with the conversations I was having with my employer at the time when I was leaving. So yeah, I didn't take a complete leap of faith into nothing. I had a 10-week contract lined up, which ended up lasting for 3 years at varying degrees of numbers of days, etc. So there is that. I think the other point is, in terms of when, is around the skill sets. You were asking about the number of years and things. Well, also I think it's about progression. It was always about progression for me, and about learning, and me looking at my career and going, like, am I progressing here? Am I developing new skills? Am I learning new things? Because if you are in your current role, you're getting lots of opportunities to do different things and and you're happy with that, then you may decide to stay and continue to do that longer and get more experience, because the longer you wait, the more experience you get internally, the more value you're then providing later as a consultant. For me, I felt like, I'd had that breakthrough project. I'd delivered successfully for 2 years, which set me up really nicely. And then to prove to myself as much as anything that I could go to a completely new business, a respectable firm, based in London, moved from Sheffield down to London and didn't know anyone at the firm. It wasn't like it wasn't because of relationships I built up over years or anything like that. Those weren't the reasons for the success the next time around. And it sort of proved to me that I did have a blueprint that worked. And after 2 years, I got to a point where I felt, okay, well, I've done this, and I've sort of done it again. And what's next? And there was a few situations internally as well, in terms of where we were potentially going to be working with some new products and things, and maybe the business case didn't go through or whatever. Perhaps I could have been more patient than I was, but I wanted control over. I wanted to have control over if I wanted to go out and learn a new tool and work with a new tool, that I would have control over doing that, and also have those sorts of opportunities. So I do think getting a solid background and getting experience and a skill that you can utilize is very important. And the timing of it, you'll never know what the right time is. But I think Lucy made the point of it about gut feel and following your instinct.
That makes sense. I guess we all deal with continuous improvement, right? I guess that continuous improvement of ourselves is a threshold that maybe never gets fully met. But I guess, Lucy, when is the right time, skills wise?
I think to be a consultant, you need to have quite a wide range of different skills. So there's sort of the technical skills, you know what you're talking about. There's quite a lot of soft skills involved. There's a lot around communication, quick learning, collaboration, being able to present, things like that. And then I think professional skills as well. It's all about your level of knowledge about the industry, project management, research, strategic thinking, change management. There's all these sort of different elements that if you've got a little bit of experience in each of them, you'll build on them and learn more. But I think those are all sort of quite an important foundation if you're going to make the leap and do it on your own. And I think really underpinning all of it actually is confidence. I think you really have to believe in yourself, and that you can do it, and accept that things will be difficult. And I know we're sort of going to get onto some of the challenges, but I think it's quite a broad mix of skills for it to be successful.
That makes sense. I have a lead on question in a sec, just for all of you, an easy one, I hope. But Tom, when is the right time, skills wise?
Yeah, look, I think skills wise, it's a tricky one, right? And this might be too contentious statements you're making a legal ops career call, but I think there is a challenge in the legal ops and legal tech space where there are lots of people entering it where when you dig into the CV, these people have had 2 or 3 years experience in the workplace before getting frustrated. And while it's good that people have fresh ideas and new ideas, I think often that is people who haven't seen enough of the picture to understand why what looks like a frustration is actually a very sensible mechanism. And I think this is part of the challenge. So you shouldn't go too soon. But I also, like for me, so I was raised on a council estate in Bristol, and I know that I've drawn most of the diversity aces in terms of sort of like that sense of entitlement and to have the room listed and all this kind of stuff. But I've still always had this nervousness, that imposter syndrome nervousness when sitting somewhere. And I think this sounds a little bit like what Robert was saying earlier. You reach a point where the evidence just stacks up in front of you. And you're kind of like, no matter how much I beat myself up on any objective reading of what I'm looking at here, I'm bringing a lot of value. And I'm not saying I bring all the value. I'm not saying I bring the most value. I completely agree with Lucy and Rob that, of course, you need to always be learning and always be listening and always be working out where you can improve. But I think for me, it was that point. It was that point where it's like, someone's crazy in the discussion of the value that's happening here, and I'm 99% sure it's not me. And I think that's probably the point where you're almost ready to explode out into like, let's get this stuff out there. But then maybe I'm too cautious. You know what I mean? Maybe I should have jumped in 2 years after qualifying and got on with it.
If I can, so I know I'm breaking protocol here, Mark, by jumping in with another point on this. And I think it comes to the distinction of what you're moving into, right? Because what we're talking about here is going into consulting and saying, well, you need to have you don't necessarily need 10 years, whatever, right? But you need that kind of real experience to then be able to go into a room and advise and tell other people what to, consult on the best approach, right? But you need to have some authority. You do need to have some experience for that. If you're on the other hand, if you're an entrepreneur and you've got a business idea, right, and you want to go out there and grow a business and deliver something, then actually you can probably throw a lot of those rules out of the window. Yes, experience and contacts in the industry would be very helpful, but by all means don't wait 10 years to put that idea out there, because the tech moves on, everything moves on. So I just wanted to make that distinction. We're not saying everyone has to wait 10 years before they're going to start their own business.
Interestingly, my lead-on question was about business skills. I suppose when we were talking then, we're kind of talking about the skills and experience of within legal operations or within legal, I suppose, and a kind of understanding the processes and the analysis of it, and I guess essentially the implementation of things to solve problems within it. But I guess with you guys, I suppose you have your own businesses, right? So I suppose you need the business skills that then go around it, your kind of marketing, your BD, kind of like other aspects of business that maybe don't come naturally or don't come within the remits of your previous roles. So I guess feel free to jump in, one of you. But I'm guessing that the right time also is the right time to understand those kind of concepts and be able to apply them to create the name of your business, or understand kind of how you develop a pipeline or stuff like that. So I'm guessing that business skills are also relevant to determining when the right time is. So maybe go for it.
I was going to say, I think it's definitely very helpful, right? And I feel very lucky in that when I look at both from my defense life and my FMCG life, the teams that I was supporting were looking at a lot of the skills that I'm now applying here. So even though I wasn't doing it, I was I was sort of advising on the legal intricacies and seeing sort of what their reasons were, what their methods were, and the like. And so I get to apply them. But I think, for all that I said earlier about sort of like, having an understanding of what you're offering, I don't think that, you can't be perfect, and you're never going to be perfect. And so you can learn that stuff. You can find people who'll fill in the gaps. And there are loads of people who go in and they're good at one thing, but they're good enough and they've got a strong enough vision as to what they want to do that they can work out how to go around the edges. And also, I mean, picking up one thing that Lucy mentioned earlier about networking and like, do you have a strong enough network? When I left my last employer, I had a network of virtually zero. Like, my whole network was former colleagues. I'd never even tried to go to industry events. And one reason that I ended up saying, actually, I'm not going to go back in the workplace, I'm going to try this consultancy, is it's amazing how supportive the community is out there. Not just people like yourself, Mark, but, like, there's loads of people that are actually there to support. And you can build that network surprisingly quickly, provided that you're engaging and being a human in all of it. And I think it's the same with the other business skills as well. There are people who can help you with marketing or business development or admin or whatever. Those support networks exist. So I don't think that should be a specific impediment, really. That'd be my take.
That makes sense. Lucy?
Yeah, I agree with that. I think those are things you just figure out as you go along. You get through your first tax year and then you work out what you're meant to do with your tax return. It's a little bit like that. I think a brand is important, and think about your purpose and how you want to portray yourself. I think running a business, I mean, if you have a problem with your laptop, you kind of turn it off and turn it back on again, and then you have to find your own way. You have to be quite self-sufficient on a lot of things. But I wouldn't say it shouldn't be a barrier to setting up on your own. There's a lot of help out there with all those different elements. And yeah, like Tom said, lots of networks, communities, and people who are in a similar position that you can reach out about certain things.
Okay, that's
Yeah.
good, Lucy. I guess the next. Sorry, Rob.
So I was going to answer, or do you want to move on?
In the spirit of, I don't think we have a lot of time to get through some of the questions that we have, and that's partially my fault because I've added in some questions into the list. But I suppose if Rob, I suppose if we could take the next question, just about circumstances. When is the right time in terms of circumstances? And that, I suppose that's not just kind of maybe having the contract there ready to go, but maybe the kind of work-life balance at home and things like that. So I suppose looking at it in I suppose a bit more of a holistic way.
Sure. Yeah. Okay. So I mean, we've sort of covered experience, haven't we? And I think in terms of your personal situation, it's never going to be perfect, but it's something you need to discuss. If you have a partner, you need to discuss it with your partner and look at, do you have the the financial stability to be able to take the risks and potentially handle the initial fluctuations in income that you may receive. Have you got a mortgage and all that, and kids and all that kind of thing? Your personal appetite for risk as well, and not just yours, but your family, if that's what if you have one. And then in terms of your goals, I mean, we talked about career progression, work-life balance, exactly. You made that point, and starting to look at what you want it to look like. What's your ideal kind of situation? So you're going to take the jump, and what are you aiming to achieve? Are you wanting to work more flexibly 2 days a week, or are you wanting to do what I did when I first jumped into it, working all the hours and all the days you can? So yeah, considering all those factors to make the decision.
And Lucy, when is the right time in terms of circumstances, or is there never a truly right time?
I think if you wait for the right time, you run the risk of never doing it. I think, like I mentioned before, the stars need to align to some degree, but it's up to you to decide to that degree that happens. I think it's also important to understand the market as well. I think for me, legal operations at the moment is, a really exciting time. There's a lot of change going on, tech, Gen AI, but generally mindset with in-house legal teams. There's a lot of cost control. So there's a lot of change that's needed. The challenge is getting teams to spend. Unfortunately, it's discretionary spend, is what we offer. It's not like it's legal advice. So I think that's always one of the challenges. But I think it's really good just to look across the market and understand who else is operating in that space. You may not be able to work out whether they're making a success of it or not, but what's going on in the market in terms of what you want to offer, and how are you going to fit in and where are you going to fit in. I think it's quite a useful evaluation.
Yeah, definitely. Who are you competing against for the same sort of work, I guess? And Tom?
So a small bit on that, who you're competing against. It's important to remember you might not be competing against people who have exactly the same offering as you. So this concept of like, what's the job to be done? What's the ultimate output that people are trying to achieve? And how are you competing there? And sometimes by looking at that slightly more elevated angle, that can actually open up opportunities that stand out for you. Or you can also realize that there's this sort of cloud slowly gathering on the horizon, which makes it a space that is not particularly sensible to move into. So I think that's one thing. I also want to sort of build a little bit on what Rob was saying about that sort of scenario mapping. I do think that, what's the realistic worst case scenario, and then having that conversation with the people it's important to. And I looked at it from 3 core angles. One was financial, one was in terms of sort of time and capacity, and one was in terms of sort of energy and emotional bandwidth. And actually having that proper conversation when you factor in, if you don't have a contract ready to go and to kick you off, even if you've got the best goodwill in the world from loads of prospective clients, you don't know what their buying cycles look like. They're going to have to be getting various budgetary approval. You don't know what's going to knock their capacity sideways. So it's that, how long can I actually realistically go at this level, and how long can my partner handle whatever I'm dropping as a consequence of doing this? And these, I think I feel very lucky that we had some very frank conversations, not aggressive frank, like open and honest and loving frank, kind of conversations about exactly those kind of things. So I think that's really important. Is don't go in with your optimistic, tomorrow I'll have a multi-billion-pound business and I'll be employing 500 people. It's that assume you're in for I've gone in assuming this is like a 3-year hard slog. My mate set up a business 20 years ago. He made 5,000 revenue, £80 profit in his first year. And it's like that. Is that something you can handle, and is that something you're cool with, and sort of move on that basis is the way that I'm going about it anyway.
That makes sense. I think that leads nicely, I suppose, to the next question, which is, I suppose, how do you make a good run of it once you're in? You've made a decision. You've decided to go for it. You set it up. This is kind of day one. How do you make a good run of it kind of at that point? Maybe Rob.
Yeah, I'll let you know when I have the answers to that question. Yeah, I mean, obviously we talked about balance, right? And maybe it's a good time for me to talk about some of the mistakes I've made over the years. But when I first started doing this, I mean, I was very lucky, as I said, I had a contract to start with. And those first 2 or 3 years, I just had my head down doing work, right, and I was focused on the implementation. That's why I went into it, because I enjoyed doing the work. I enjoyed the project work, right, and it was fantastic. I was working multiple clients, 6 days a week, solid contracts, plus doing bits and bobs at the weekend because my family circumstances at the time allowed that. But I mean, I honestly, like, I probably didn't go to a conference for 3 years because, and I completely neglected all of the business development activities because I was busy. I had more than enough work. Probably based on the investment I'd made in, speaking, the things I'd done for the last however many years had set me up into a position where I had a lot of momentum going into it, and I was kind of riding the wave that if you've started at the right time, you get that initial impetus. And I rode that wave for sort of 3 years. And the conference thing, like, it's funny because I'd have had to take a day off, which would have cost me, a lost day rate, and I would have had to pay for the conference. So some of those are sort of £1,200 for a ticket. And I've got a funny story about that, maybe we probably won't have time, but you can imagine you're looking at the numbers going, well, why would I'm taking a double hit here? I'll just do the work. And I wasn't seeing the longer term picture of the investment that needed. And then COVID happened, and all of a sudden, I was planning to take some paternity leave in a few months' time, but this kind of happened early, and suddenly discretionary spend, as Lucy was saying, can just be cut. And a couple of my contracts were naturally coming to a conclusion at that point anyway. And all of a sudden I'm like, well, I haven't been to these conferences, I haven't done the BD work. How do you then do that in COVID? And it was I mean, it was stressful, amongst other things. That was the main thing. It was stressful because there was no mechanism at that point. And okay, a global pandemic is not going to come along every day, but I think you've got to plan for these kind of situations and expect that they could happen. And a lot of good came out of it in the end. Obviously, that was when I started doing some stuff for Contract Genetica, just the AI startup, just doing stuff casually, kind of ad hoc because I had some time. And so I've been coming out of that scenario the last couple of years. I'm now learning the things I should have learned 6 or 7 years ago around business development, marketing, LinkedIn. I'm sort of learning all of this. Lucy was saying you learn as you go, and I'm sort of doing that now. Would you believe it? All these years later. So hopefully that gives some insight into what not to do and also what to do. And I'll save my one piece of advice from that for the end, perhaps, and let someone else speak for a moment.
Sure. I'll pass this on in a sec, but I think there's I think you naturally, as a consultant or as a contractor, even sometimes as well, I guess you have to take in as much work as you can because you don't know when the work ends, I suppose. But it sounds like you need to also kind of look into the distance and see you have to kind of build up that level of business, different client customers, because they all move at different paces. And like you say, uh, a pandemic was something that I guess nobody foresaw, um, and it had such a massive impact. Um, I guess if I pass the same question over to Lucy, uh, I guess how do you make a good go of it?
It's similar challenges. It's sort of always got one eye on the future. It's very easy to just put your head down and focus on the work, but it's little reminders and it's little things. I mean, LinkedIn, question whether that directly brings work in, but it's useful to just get you thinking in that way. And yeah, speaking sorts at conferences, and then maybe you avoid the high cost of the ticket. So there's lots of sort of different ways of playing the game, and it very much is a game. But I think as well, I often think, not just here, but in my personal life, if it was a friend doing this, what would I be telling them to do? Because sometimes you can be so absorbed in it, you don't really lift your head out and, look around you and see other ways of doing things. And I think in all of it, I think well-being has got to be a priority. One of the challenges about being in either on your own or in a really small team is you don't have that network of sort of corporate support that you maybe have in big organizations. So there's things like well-being and other sort of support networks. I think you have to remind yourself. It's a bit like the IT team. You've got to be your own HR team. You've got to be your own performance manager. But just trying to keep a little bit of discipline around that structure, I think, can really help.
I think when you were talking then, I was thinking about, I guess, the sort of work you do, or you guys do, which I suppose is talking and advising people that maybe don't know the art of the possible because they're heads down and doing the work that they need to do on a kind of day to day, but can't see, I suppose, around that, right?
Exactly. So when I work with clients, we look across the whole operating model. So all the pillars of the operating model. So there is people, processes, technology, and you kind of have to apply that to yourself. Are you using the best technology that's available to you? Are you paying for it, or have you managed to get a free license somewhere? Like all of those different elements, I think, apply, and it's quite helpful to challenge yourself as you would a client. Absolutely.
And Tom, how do you make a good go of it? And
Yeah,
this would be the last question before the very last question.
well, look, I mean, it's just bearing in mind I'm much earlier in the journey than Lucy and Robert are, right? And I suppose so. The only real builds I can add here, I think this point about resilience that Lucy was talking about, and it's advice that I got when I was debating whether to start. Again, some people who I'd never met before, but they were like, you need to make sure you're able to handle the lows and the highs. And it is really, I'm finding it a little bit strange when I've had sort of 20 years of like, they give me the work and I still expand out my work and find new things to do. But ultimately, I'm still sat within a very simple foundational paradigm of you're an employee and you've got stuff to do. And finding like, you have some days where you're just on top of the world, and then you have other days where you're just like, oh my God, everything, I'm so useless, and this is going to be a disaster. And both of them are insane thoughts, but it's I stress I'm a very stable individual who brings a lot to the table. But I think that what Lucy was saying about those kind of mechanisms, those tricks, so it's things like making sure, you're not just trying to meet people for virtual coffees for sales. You're meeting people for virtual coffee to keep talking to people and to make sure you're not disappearing into some kind of spiral and things like that. That's one of the things I'm doing. And I'm also trying to divide up my, what is my market? What do I need to achieve as a bare minimum for marketing? What do I need to achieve as a bare minimum for BD? What do I need to achieve as a bare minimum for output? And then make sure I'm managing expectations around that. And then also, I think it's called dog fooding, isn't it? Sort of eating your own product, which again, I feel I'm just repeating what Lucy said, and she's already put it very well. But I think making sure that you're delivering that, I think is also a way of helpful because it just sort of reinforces what you're putting out there. But that's what I'm trying to do anyway.
It makes sense. The last question, maybe the most useful for the people that are attending or viewers later, I suppose, is what advice, or I suppose what one piece of advice would you give to people looking to make the bold move into consultancy? And that you alluded to it earlier, Rob. So you can start with this one.
Yeah, sure. And I think, well, certainly I mean, looking at your strengths and weaknesses, and for most of us, we may have been good salespeople internally within an organization to implement change, but we may actually lack some of the broader business, entrepreneurial skills, the business development and sales and that side of thing. So take the time, start now, whilst you're in a safe space and you've got a salary, and outside of your working hours, your time is your own, and you don't feel pressured to be always kind of working on the business. You're in a safe space where you can start to learn and to develop those sorts of skills. So I'm talking about learning about LinkedIn, so start posting content, start researching that side of things, how businesses work, and in terms of BD and the sales pipelines and all that kind of stuff. Start just growing your knowledge of those areas and practicing. The LinkedIn posting is at that. You can do that. You're not selling. You're kind of doing it for your organization, and you're helping them. Because actually, all of those skills, even if you don't go into it, they're really useful skills. Because if you've probably heard of the intrapreneur, right? But if you're doing those things within the business you're in, you can help bring in clients to your current business. You become more valuable to them. You might actually see that progress your career without having to leave the organization you're at. So yeah, start that learning journey now.
I think for people that haven't seen Rob's posts, I think I laugh every time, but not because of you running or anything. So I guess for the people that haven't seen it, it is Rob doing his I think daily or weekly run, and then going through a spiel about a particular legal tech point. I laugh more because I also run, and I'm not sure I could do the same thing, of being able to kind of spiel it off as I'm running along.
I mean, yeah, just experimenting, with it. It's actually quite a safe space. You'll find people are very supportive, actually, if you just get out, put yourself out there, and don't be afraid to try things. Some of my posts, people might look at them and go, well, that was not a good one, but okay, well, tomorrow's a new day, right?
100%. And Lucy, your one piece of advice.
I think on a similar theme, I can say this as a former or recovering lawyer. I think good enough is sometimes good enough, not necessarily in terms of the output you're delivering to clients, but on a lot of things. Sometimes perfection. All kind of sayings are perfection's the enemy of good and things. And I think you can get really caught up in trying to make something really perfect. LinkedIn is a great example. I think fundamentally being a consultant, it's all about you. So as long as you're being authentic and doing if you're comfortable doing what you're doing, then you don't need to live up to sort of any other ridiculously high standards. It's your own standard, it's who you are, and I think it's that confidence that you are good enough and that you're able to go and do it.
Yeah, 100% with that one as well. I always enjoy the personality of people on LinkedIn. I think I've drawn to it more than ones that maybe don't open up maybe so much, or it just travels faster, I think, further. And Tom, your one piece of advice?
Yeah, I mean, I guess as much as I think great stuff from Lucy and Robert, but I guess I'd sort of say, have a general idea of why you're doing it, have a general idea of why people are going to buy it from you, and have an understanding of what you're worth. Yeah, have a realistic expectation as to what you want to be getting out of your first 18 to 24 months. And it feels to me, if you get those three, I think that you can probably move a little bit faster than you'd expect.
Definitely. And with that, that wraps up the webinar. I don't know whether anybody has any questions for the Q&A at the end. I guess we've got a few minutes left before we wrap it up entirely. But if you have, feel free to quickly put it in the chat. Otherwise, feel free to send it to me, and I can pass it on later.
You've got a question, have you, Mark? I was going to fill the gap.
I have one that was given the other day, just before this, which is obviously hindsight is a wonderful thing. When you look back, you can, I suppose, see what you should have done or maybe could have done differently. So I suppose the question I think that they had was around if there's something that you would change, what would you change about your journey? Go for it, Tom.
I would have launched about 3 months earlier than I did.
Okay.
I think I basically, as I was on the cusp of launching, I had a potential job offer, and I ended up spending a month and a half exploring the job offer, and it sort of pushed me sideways. And I think I knew that I wanted to do this and at least give it a go, but I wasn't quite honest enough with myself, and I think the fear kicked in, that kind of thing. So I think for me, it's yeah, that'd be, if there's one thing I'd do differently, I'd have probably moved a little bit faster in terms of getting an offering out into the public.
Okay. And the others, Rob, Lucy?
Yeah, I mean, I've indicated it already, but that learning that I was just talking about, I wish I'd started that 6, 7, 8 years ago, and whereas now I'm trying to juggle that learning amongst delivering client projects, and I've got a wife and a young child. It makes life very fun, and you never stop learning. So yeah, I wish I'd started that process earlier.
And Lucy, to wrap us all up.
Yeah, I'm not sure if I'd change anything in sort of my career choices and how I've ended up here. I mean, none of it was very deliberate. It was all sort of just how it ended up. But it's got me to where I want to be. So I think it's about making those decisions, as I said before, it's about gut feel and what sort of feels right at the time. What would I do differently? I think I'd probably understand how much of a sales role it is, which I hadn't quite realised before. You do have to convince people why you are the right person for the job and why they should find budget to spend on you. So I think probably that's been my biggest learning. I was in private practice for 8 years, but wasn't really sort of that involved at that level. And then when you're in house, you never used to any of it, on the other side. So I think that I probably underestimated it.
That makes sense. I imagine there's a lot of BD, I guess, for all of you that you have to do to keep things going and growing. But thanks very much, Lucy, Tom, Rob. I've enjoyed the webinar. I hope that people that remain enjoyed it as well. Feel free to give a reaction, a thumbs up if you did enjoy it. Oh, yeah. The next webinar, which will be next month. So the next one in the series is about mentoring, and should hopefully include some stories from the people that have been part of the program so far, that have managed to find jobs, or they've kind of been inspired in other ways. So that's the next one, which will be the end of February. So I look forward to seeing you all there again, and have a good rest of your day. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks very much, Mark.